The Jennifer Pan Case, a 30-minute true crime narrative. Imagine being a parent, waking in the middle of the night to find intruders in your home. You're tied up, helpless, while strangers move through your house. You hear gunshots. You feel pain. You think you're going to die. And through it all, you hear your daughter's voice, begging the intruders to spare her parents' lives. Now imagine surviving that attack and learning the truth. Your daughter arranged the whole thing. She hired those men. She wanted you dead. The daughter you sacrificed everything for, the daughter you thought was a successful university student with a bright future, was actually a failure and a liar who decided murder was easier than admitting the truth. This is the story of Jennifer Pan, a 24-year-old woman from Markham, Ontario, who orchestrated a fake home invasion to have her parents killed in 2010. Her mother died. Her father survived. And in surviving, he uncovered a web of lies so extensive that Jennifer's entire life turned out to be fiction. Jennifer presented herself as the perfect daughter, straight-A student, talented figure skater, promising pharmacology student. But in reality, she'd been living a double life for years. She'd forged report cards, faked acceptance letters from universities, pretended to have a job that didn't exist, and created an entirely false persona rather than admit she wasn't meeting her parents' expectations. When her lies were finally exposed and her parents imposed strict rules on her life, Jennifer didn't confess or try to rebuild their trust. She hired hitmen through her drug dealer boyfriend and plotted to inherit the family home and insurance money. The plan almost worked. But her father survived, and his testimony would unravel everything. This is a story about toxic perfectionism, about the pressure immigrant parents can place on their children, about how lies compound until they become impossible to maintain, and about how far someone will go to avoid facing consequences. Jennifer Pan was born in 1986 to Vietnamese immigrants Huy Han and Bich Ha Pan, who'd fled Vietnam and rebuilt their lives in Canada. The Pans lived in Markham, a suburban city just outside Toronto, in a comfortable home they'd worked hard to afford. Huy Han and Bich Ha were strict, traditional parents with high expectations for their daughter. They'd sacrificed enormously to give Jennifer opportunities they never had, and they expected excellence in return. Education was paramount. Success was non-negotiable. Jennifer would go to university, become a professional, a doctor or pharmacist, and make their sacrifices worthwhile. As a child, Jennifer appeared to meet these expectations. She was a dedicated figure skater, training intensively and showing promise. She played piano. She got good grades. To outsiders, the Pan family seemed to embody the immigrant success story. But the pressure was immense. Jennifer later described feeling like she had to be perfect, that anything less than excellence was failure, that disappointing her parents was unthinkable. Every aspect of her life was controlled or monitored. Her friends were limited. Her activities were prescribed. Her future was planned. By high school, cracks began to appear. Jennifer struggled academically in certain subjects. Her grades weren't perfect. She worried about disappointing her parents but felt unable to meet their standards. And this is where Jennifer made a choice that would define the rest of her life. Instead of telling the truth and accepting that she wasn't perfect, she began to lie. She forged report cards, changing grades to make them appear better than they were. She started small, bumping a B to an A, hiding a poor test grade. Her parents, trusting her and not regularly contacting teachers, believed what she showed them. The lies worked. So Jennifer continued. And as often happens with lies, they escalated. When Jennifer's grades weren't good enough for university admission, she didn't tell her parents. Instead, she claimed she'd been accepted to Ryerson University in Toronto. She even forged an acceptance letter. Her parents were thrilled. Their daughter was going to university, on track to become a pharmacist just as they'd hoped. But Jennifer wasn't attending Ryerson. She was taking a few classes at the University of Toronto Scarborough campus, not enough to be a full-time student, not making progress toward any degree. She spent her days at coffee shops or with friends, maintaining the charade when she came home. The deception continued for years. Jennifer would leave home as if going to class, spend the day elsewhere, then return home with fabricated stories about her courses and professors. She claimed to be excelling, making her parents proud with a success that didn't exist. By 2008, Jennifer should have been graduating. She told her parents she had indeed graduated from Ryerson with a degree in pharmacology. She forged a diploma. She participated in staged graduation photos with friends who were actually graduating. Her parents attended a graduation ceremony, though they were seeing Jennifer pretend to graduate while sitting among real graduates. Then Jennifer claimed to have been accepted to the University of Toronto for further study in pharmacology. More lies. More forged documents. She even created a volunteer position at Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto, claiming she was doing pharmaceutical research. In reality, she was dating her boyfriend Daniel Wong and spending her time with him and his friends. Daniel Wong was everything Jennifer's parents wouldn't approve of. He was older, a drug dealer with no prospects for legitimate work. Jennifer's parents wanted her to date someone professional, educated, successful. Daniel was none of these things. But Jennifer had been living a double life for so long that adding a secret boyfriend was just another layer of deception. To maintain all these lies, Jennifer developed elaborate systems. She had fake email addresses for fake professors. She created false assignments and described imaginary research projects. She talked about classmates who didn't exist and exams she never took. The web of lies grew so complex it's astounding she managed to keep track of it all. But in 2010, everything began to unravel. Jennifer's parents found information suggesting their daughter hadn't actually been attending the University of Toronto. They began asking questions, digging deeper, and gradually the truth emerged. Jennifer wasn't a university student. She hadn't graduated from Ryerson. She didn't volunteer at Sick Kids Hospital. The pharmacology degree didn't exist. Years of achievement they'd celebrated were fabrications. Their perfect daughter was a lie. The confrontation was devastating. Jennifer's parents felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. They'd been deceived for years, made fools of, believing a fantasy while Jennifer lived a secret life. Their response was to impose strict rules. Jennifer would live at home, cut off contact with Daniel Wong, find legitimate work, and rebuild their trust. Jennifer, 24 years old and having lived a lie for nearly a decade, faced a choice. She could accept her parents' rules, confess everything, and try to build an honest life. Or she could find another way out. She chose murder. Jennifer Pan made a calculated decision. If her parents were dead, she could inherit their home and life insurance, be with Daniel Wong, and never have to face the consequences of her lies. It was a sociopathic conclusion that reduced her parents from people who loved her to obstacles to be eliminated. Through Daniel Wong's connections in Toronto's criminal underworld, Jennifer arranged to have her parents killed. The plan was to stage a home invasion robbery that would end with her parents shot to death. Jennifer would be present but would survive as the traumatized daughter, the sole witness to a tragic home invasion. The men Jennifer hired for the murder were Lenford Crawford, David Milviganum, and Eric Carty. Daniel Wong's friend Ricardo Duncan helped coordinate the plot. These weren't professional hitmen, they were low-level criminals willing to commit murder for money. The first attempt failed. On a night in October 2010, the hired killers went to the Pan house but aborted the plan when they saw Jennifer's father was still awake. Jennifer was furious that they'd failed, putting pressure on everyone involved to complete the job. A second attempt was scheduled for November 8, 2010. This time, Jennifer made sure everything was in place. She knew her parents' schedules, when they'd be home, where they'd be in the house. She communicated with the killers via text and phone calls, coordinating the attack. On the evening of November 8, Jennifer's parents were home. Her father was upstairs. Her mother was downstairs. Jennifer was in her room, in contact with the killers, letting them know when to enter. Around 9:30 p.m., 3 masked men entered the Pan home through a basement door Jennifer had left unlocked for them. They found Bitch Ha first, restraining her. Then they got Hui Han when he came downstairs to investigate the commotion. The Pans were tied up with shoelaces, their hands and feet bound. They were forced to sit on the floor while the intruders moved through the house, apparently searching for valuables. This was the staging, making it look like a robbery. Jennifer was also tied up, part of the pretense that she was a victim like her parents. But her restraints were loose, arranged so she could work free when the killers left. What happened next would be the crucial detail that ultimately exposed Jennifer's involvement. Jennifer wasn't held with her parents. She was taken upstairs to her room and left there, free to roam the house after a few minutes, while her parents remained bound downstairs. This would prove impossible to explain as the random act it was meant to appear. Jennifer listened as the plan reached its climax. One of the men went to where her parents were being held. Then gunshots. Bitch Harpan was shot in the head. The bullet killed her instantly. Hui Hanpan was also shot in the face and neck. The shooter believed he'd killed both parents and fled the scene with his accomplices. Jennifer, following the plan, waited a few moments, then went to where her father lay on the floor, seemingly dead. She used her father's phone to call 911, crying, claiming intruders had invaded the home and shot her parents. She sounded terrified, traumatized, like a daughter who just witnessed her parents' murder. But Hui Hanpan wasn't dead. The bullets had caused terrible damage, but he was alive. As paramedics and police arrived, he was stabilized and rushed to the hospital. He would survive, though he'd lost an eye and suffered significant injuries. Bitch Harpan had not been so fortunate. She died in the attack, killed by hitmen her own daughter had hired. When police arrived, they found a seemingly straightforward case, a home invasion robbery where the mother had been killed and the father critically wounded. The daughter, thankfully, appeared to have been spared by the intruders, tied up but not seriously harmed. But as investigators began interviewing Jennifer and examining the scene, inconsistencies emerged that would eventually unravel her entire plan. From the beginning, something felt off to investigators about Jennifer Pan's story. While it's not uncommon for one family member to be spared in a home invasion, the pattern didn't quite fit. Why had Jennifer been separated from her parents? Why tie her up upstairs when the parents were downstairs? Why leave her relatively unharmed while executing both parents? Home invasion robbers typically keep all victims together for easier control. Jennifer's initial statement to police described 3 masked intruders who'd broken in, tied up the family, demanded money, then shot her parents before fleeing. She described being terrified, hearing gunshots, not knowing if her parents were alive or dead until police arrived. But as detectives dug deeper, Jennifer's story began to show cracks. Investigators interviewed Jennifer multiple times over the following days and weeks. Each interview revealed new inconsistencies. Details changed. Timeline didn't match. Things that should have been clear in her memory were fuzzy, while oddly specific details emerged that seemed unlikely for a traumatized witness to remember so clearly. Then came the crucial breakthrough. Hui Hanpan regained consciousness and was able to communicate with police. What Hui Han described didn't match Jennifer's version of events. He said that while he and his wife were being held by the intruders, Jennifer was speaking with them. Not being held with her parents, not tied up and silent, but conversing with the intruders in a familiar way. He said Jennifer had walked past him and her mother while they were tied up, and the intruders didn't stop her or restrict her movement. It appeared to him that Jennifer knew these men, that she was part of what was happening, not a victim. This testimony was devastating to Jennifer's story. If her father was right, Jennifer wasn't a victim at all, she was a participant. Investigators began examining Jennifer's phone records and digital communications. They found extensive text messages and calls with Daniel Wong and others in the days leading up to the murder. The content and timing of these communications were suspicious, suggesting coordination rather than normal relationship conversations. They interviewed Daniel Wong, who initially denied any involvement but began to show signs of nervousness when pressed about his whereabouts on November 8 and his relationship with Jennifer. Police conducted surveillance on the various individuals connected to the case, watching Daniel, Jennifer, and others who might have been involved. They were building a case, gathering evidence, waiting for the right moment to move. In a crucial interview on November 22, 2010, just 2 weeks after the murder, detectives confronted Jennifer with inconsistencies in her story. They told her they had evidence that contradicted her account. They suggested she hadn't been entirely truthful. Jennifer, under pressure, began to modify her story. She admitted that maybe she'd been able to see more than she'd initially said. She acknowledged that her relationship with Daniel was more serious than she'd admitted. Small admissions, testing whether the police would accept a modified version of her story. But investigators weren't satisfied with partial truth. They knew Jennifer was lying about fundamental aspects of what happened. In a decision that would prove crucial, they conducted what's known as a Mr. Big operation. This is a Canadian law enforcement technique where undercover officers pose as members of a criminal organization and befriend the suspect. gradually drawing them into the fake organization and creating scenarios where the suspect feels comfortable confessing to crimes. It's controversial but legal in Canada. Jennifer was approached by undercover officers posing as criminals who could help her with her problem, the ongoing police investigation. They suggested their organization had ways of making evidence disappear, of influencing witnesses, but they needed to know the truth about what really happened. In conversations secretly recorded by police, Jennifer admitted her involvement. She described hiring the killers, planning the attack, leaving the door unlocked, coordinating the timing. She revealed details only someone involved in planning the crime would know. These admissions, combined with the mounting evidence from phone records, witness statements, and Hui Han's testimony, gave investigators what they needed. On December 2, 2010, Jennifer Pan was arrested and charged with first-degree murder and attempted murder. Shortly after, Daniel Wong and the three hitmen, Crawford, Milvirginum, and Carty, were also arrested and charged. Ricardo Duncan, who'd helped coordinate the plot, agreed to cooperate with investigators and testify against the others in exchange for a reduced charge. The trial of Jennifer Pan and her co-conspirators began in March 2014 and lasted months. It was one of the most sensational trials in Canadian legal history, attracting extensive media coverage and public fascination. The prosecution presented a devastating case against Jennifer. They showed the jury the extensive evidence of planning and coordination. They played recordings from the Mr. Big operation where Jennifer admitted her role. They presented Hui Han Pan, who testified about seeing his daughter conversing with the men who would murder his wife. Hui Han's testimony was heartbreaking. Here was a father who'd survived being shot in the face, who'd lost his wife, having to testify against his own daughter. He described the moment he realized Jennifer was involved, the betrayal of knowing his child had orchestrated the attack that killed her mother. The defense argued that Jennifer had been coerced or manipulated by Daniel Wong, that she was a victim of an abusive relationship, that her statements in the Mr. Big operation had been false confessions resulting from pressure and fear. But the evidence was overwhelming. The coordination, the planning, the deliberate nature of Jennifer's actions all contradicted the idea that she was a passive participant or a victim herself. On December 13, 2014, the jury found Jennifer Pan and Daniel Wong guilty of first-degree murder and attempted murder. The hitmen Crawford, Milvirginum, and Carty were also convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder. First-degree murder in Canada carries an automatic life sentence with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Jennifer Pan, at 28 years old, would be in her 50s before she could even apply for parole. The case raised numerous questions about family dynamics, cultural pressures, and the psychology that leads someone to commit such a crime. How much responsibility do Jennifer's parents bear for creating the pressure that led to her lies? While they didn't cause her to commit murder, did their rigid expectations contribute to creating a situation where Jennifer felt trapped? This question generated significant debate. Some argued that immigrant parents' high expectations, while well-intentioned, can create toxic environments where children feel they have no option but to succeed or to lie about succeeding. Others countered that millions of children face high parental expectations without resorting to murder, that Jennifer's choices were hers alone. Why did Jennifer choose murder over simply leaving? At 24, she was an adult who could have walked away, cut contact with her parents, and lived her own life. The inheritance money and the house weren't worth killing for. She could have worked, supported herself, lived independently. The answer appears to lie in Jennifer's psychology. She'd spent so many years living a lie, avoiding consequences, taking the easy way out, that even when caught, her instinct was to find another deception rather than face truth. Murder was, in her warped thinking, easier than admitting failure and rebuilding an honest life. What role did Daniel Wong play? Was he the mastermind who manipulated Jennifer, or was he a willing participant in a plan Jennifer hatched? The evidence suggests both were equally culpable, that this was a joint decision made by two people who valued their relationship and comfort over human life. For Hui Han Pan, the aftermath of the trial has been a life of unimaginable loss and betrayal. He lost his wife to murder. He lost his daughter to prison and to the knowledge of what she'd done. He's had to process both grief simultaneously, mourning his wife while grappling with his daughter's betrayal. Hui Han has largely stayed out of the public eye since the trial, living quietly and trying to rebuild a life shattered by violence. He's expressed a complex mix of emotions about Jennifer: grief over losing the daughter he thought he had, anger at her actions, and somewhere beneath it all, the lingering love a parent feels even for a child who's hurt them profoundly. The case has sparked discussions about parenting, particularly in immigrant communities where cultural expectations for children's success can be intense. Many Asian Canadian commentators have written about the pressure to excel, the fear of disappointing parents, the gap between parental expectations and children's actual abilities or interests. But these discussions always return to the same conclusion. While pressure and expectations can be harmful, the vast majority of people facing such situations don't commit murder. Jennifer Pan made a choice, a deliberate, planned, cold-blooded choice to kill her parents. Understanding the context doesn't excuse the crime. Jennifer Pan is currently serving her life sentence in a Canadian prison. She's appealed her conviction, arguing various procedural issues and claiming the Mr. Big operation was coercive. Her appeals have been largely unsuccessful. She'll be eligible to apply for parole in 2035, when she's 49 years old. Whether she'll actually be granted parole is uncertain. The calculated nature of her crime, the lack of genuine remorse she's shown, and the devastating impact on her surviving father all work against her. The story of Jennifer Pan is a cautionary tale about the dangers of living a lie, about how deception compounds until it becomes impossible to maintain, and about the horrifying extremes some people will go to rather than face consequences. It's also a reminder that the perfect family, the model student, the success story we see from outside can mask deep dysfunction and deception. Jennifer Pan looked like the ideal daughter on paper. In reality, she was a liar and a murderer. Most importantly, this story is about Bitch Ha Pan, a woman who worked hard, loved her family, and wanted her daughter to succeed, who died because her daughter valued material comfort over human life. Bitch Ha deserved better. She deserved a daughter who would have been honest with her, who would have tried to meet expectations or admitted failure, who would have walked away rather than resort to violence. Jennifer Pan's perfectionism, her web of lies, and her desperate avoidance of accountability led to her mother's death and her father's permanent injury. And it led to her own life being spent in prison, a failure far greater than any academic or professional disappointment